pass through to Jane Wrightson, who is online. And just before Jane does start with her presentation, just a background on Jane, though. She's been in her role as Retirement Commissioner for about 4 years. She's halfway through her second term. She was heavily involved, and her Retirement Commission was heavily involved with the production of the white paper almost 4 years ago now. And in that documentation, she basically stated that the current act is not fit for purpose. It doesn't have the protection for us as residents, and it must be reviewed. She's never changed her views in 3 or 4 years. And so I just asked Jane, what is her one of her major successes in the role? And she said, in actual fact, it's getting the review of the Retirement Villages Act to the current stage, and that's taken 4 years. So that we can take that as a bit of a win from our point of view. So without further ado, though, are we okay for Jane to come online? Joe, we are. So it is over to you, Jane.
Ngā mihi mahana o te wā kia koutou, ko Jane Wrightson toka wengawa ko au te mana Ahangaroa. I am the Retirement Commissioner, and I hope I'm coming through loud and clear. Am I, Brian? Thumbs up?
You certainly are, yes.
Okay, that's groovy. It's a pleasure to speak with you all today, and can I say I've been really impressed with the advocacy work you've been doing to progress the review, including lobbying government ministers, petitioning Parliament, and your new United for Seniors campaign. I'm in no doubt that your efforts are playing a large part in keeping the review on the government's agenda. I also will acknowledge the really hard work that Brian Peat, Nigel Matthews and Troy Turton have done in the last little while, and preceded, of course, by the previous chair, Peter Carr. As you know, I'm very focused on continuing to advocate for the comprehensive review to continue. We kicked this off in 2020 with the Retirement Commissioner's 2 papers assessing the situation, and we concluded that the Retirement Villages legislative framework requires urgent improvement to eliminate unfair terms and contracts and better protect the rights of consumers. The Acts, the regulations and code are 21 years old, and the industry has become much larger and more complicated since it was enacted. In short, the legislation is outdated and risks being unfit for purpose. The core issues have been bubbling away for many years, and it's time to settle them. I'm very aware that most residents need to use the proceeds from selling their home to buy into a village and have often modest funds remaining. As you know, by your late 70s or early 80s, a number are living predominantly on New Zealand super. And this can make it really difficult for residents to leave if they're unhappy at the village because of the significant financial cost of terminating their occupational right agreement. This means it's even more important that there are strong consumer protections in place. I agree with your stance that a comprehensive legislative review is preferable to code changes alone. These are long-standing issues and need to be resolved with a holistic look at the system that will make the framework fit for purpose for another 2 decades. Many of the important issues relating to fairness and consumer protection cannot be addressed through code changes alone and require amendment to the Act itself. That's hard. An example is, standardising documents when you enter a village, clarifying responsibility for chattels, and improving the complaint scheme. A comprehensive review is the best way forward if we're to see a contemporary and effective legislative regime that strikes the right balance between the rights and responsibilities of residents and operators. I'm heartened to hear that the Prime Minister is expressing an opinion on this. And I'm heartened to hear that Minister Costello is working alongside Minister Portica. The Ministry for Housing, to put you into the picture of this sort of bureaucracy at the moment, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, will be reporting to Minister Portica shortly. And I've worked hard to ensure that Minister Portica understands the issues with the current legislation, including the confusing documentation when entering a village, the maintenance of chattels, the complicated complaint system, the tricky interface between retirement village and care facilities, and of course the process of reselling after a resident vacates a unit. Normally, it's the case that if somebody like a village resident has agreed to the terms of a contract, they can't later complain when the terms of that contract are relied on by another party. That's pretty basic law. However, I've made it very clear to the Minister that the research we've conducted and multiple submissions from residents show that a reasonable person would have difficulty predicting the unfair situations that can arise under the current framework. Some real life examples we raised with the Minister alongside the ones that I know the association has. Having to wait 9 months to 2 years for a capital sum to be returned, families having to pay for their parents' rest home care while waiting for that capital sum, having to pay for a replacement water cylinder or other chattels not owned by the resident, needing to move a partner with dementia into a rest home that's off-site because they require high levels of care, future facilities promised on purchase failing to be built, lack of confidence in using the complaints process because the operator has more resources, a more thorough understanding of the complicated complaints process, and is more likely to engage legal advice at an earlier stage. Put simply, we understand that rocking the boat where you live can be challenging. The HUD proposals, put simply, in their consultation paper, covered replacing the disclosure statement with plain language documents, introducing a partially standardised ORA, requiring operators to cover the direct costs of maintaining and repairing operator-owned channels, implementing a new dispute resolution scheme, providing better information on transferring within a village to aged residential care, stopping fees after a unit is vacated, and introducing a mandatory time frame for repaying a resident's capital when they move out. But despite what you've heard this morning, the coalition government has made it very clear that it's ruthlessly focused on manifesto promises and its stated priorities in the 90-day plans. The RV review has not appeared on those lists. And so the videos you've just seen are a really good indication that there may be some movement. It's not evident to me at the moment, but to have both two-party leaders commit to it is excellent work on behalf of the association. This is not HUD's fault or Minister Portica's fault. The Associate Minister Housing, Minister Portica, is currently grappling with the wicked problem of emergency housing, hard, with a ministry that is concurrently facing staffing and resourcing cuts. So getting this project prioritised on the government's work agenda is absolutely necessary. Your intense political advocacy will be crucial here, arguing that much of the heavy lifting has already been done and that a timeline to getting legislation introduced to the House is essential. And I put to you, what's also important is thinking about plan Bs and compromises, if that's what it takes for the project not to stall. The RV legislation has never been prioritised in its whole 2-decade lifetime. Not surprising, because you will understand how hard and politically occupying general housing policy is. So you need to keep making noise with consistent messages about the need for change, and find those high-level political advocates and keep talking to them. I'm calling for political leadership to make the right decisions for change, for HUD to be directed to continue with the project, to publish the results of the assessment of 11,000 submissions, and to provide the Minister with a timeline for revising the Act and the Code so he can share this with you. We are also proposing a couple of options to help HUD as they grapple with their competing priorities. And just as a final point, as you know, the unit purchase documentation is lengthy, confusing, and mostly non-negotiable. This contrasts with the highly attractive marketing material used to attract potential residents. It's not a stretch to say that some residents may not fully understand what they're signing up for, despite receiving legal advice. So to this end, as well as advocating hard for a comprehensive review, my office has also been working on providing good information to prospective residents of villages to help them make a decision that will work for them now and the future. Our Sorted webpage, sorted.org.nz, provides a wealth of information for prospective residents about important considerations, including how retirement villages work, understanding the costs, and being clear about your circumstances and lifestyle preferences. Like the Prime Minister and Mr. Peters and Ms. Costello, I think retirement villages offer an excellent housing opportunity for many seniors, and I want to see the framework strong and the overall situation with villages continue to grow. There are, generally speaking, a wonderful place to live, as you know, but that does not mean that change is not necessary. In my view, it is. So I'm happy to take any questions if I can. I hope you find the AGM productive, and I look forward to working closely with you over the next year as we support the government to commit to take the review through the legislative process and to give us a timeline for doing so. Ngā mihi mana, kia ora koutou.
So that went down pretty well, didn't it? That's very good. Thanks, Jane. I'll just start the question up just very quickly. Jane, you got a discussion with the Minister Costello in about an hour's time, I understand.
How come you've got access to my diary, Brian Pete?
Is there anything that anyone in the audience would like to ask Jane about her meeting very shortly with Costello, Minister Costello?
Or anything else?
I would like to know if within your role, Jane, you are able to hold to account the RVA and the statutory supervisors. Are they doing a good job?
In my view, generally speaking, yes. I can't hold them to account. My role in this space is to take an overview of the retirement villages legislation and its framework. So no, I don't have an oversight of the RVA or the supervisors. Both, I think, do good jobs in their own way. The problem is systemic, meaning it's based in the law that is now out of kilter with modern day process, particularly around consumer protections, which have changed a lot in 20 years.
Hello, Jane. I'm just wondering about the retrospective aspect of the review. Where do you stand on that area?
That is probably one of the most difficult problems. As I said before, retrospective legislation is hardly ever done, except if you're the IRD. The IRD can do it. They have swinging powers, not like the rest of us. So I'm generally speaking, I'm not in favour of it. There might be some opportunity for small tweaks, however. If everything hinges on retrospective, then I think that would probably stall the progress we've got. If there are small improvements, for instance, around chattel ownership and that kind of thing, that's possible, in my view. That's why what you and the association are doing is so important and so laudable, because some of you, you're not going to benefit as much as, say, a future resident will, but you'll have done your bit.
Mm. Yeah. Any other questions of Jane?
Yes, I've got one for Jane. Di Sinclair speaking, Jane. How do you see your role progressing over the next 12 to 8 months?
In this space?
Your role.
In
Yes.
this space, I'm going to continue to be really annoying. because the action needs to be taken now at central government level, and central government, let's say the officials, are really heavily burdened at the moment. This always happens with a new government, with changing priorities and new jobs to do. And of course, they're cutting the number of public servants as well. So that's causing a little bit of, there's quite a bit of deep thinking going about how you can progress the agenda with fewer people. It's an interesting management challenge. But I think my job as Commissioner is to be a principled advocate, to take a position based on fact and well-researched information, and to continue to be annoying till the job's done.
Any other questions at all? Question online. This will be good.
Yes, I
Yes, that's
can't see the questions on the chat, so you'll have to read them to me.
Yeah. Call her. Ask Joe to come. Oh, Joe, can you unmute yourself at all? On the.
How's that? How's that?
Sounds, yeah. There you go.
I'm very heartened by listening to Jane's comments. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm deeply heartened by your comments, because with emails and examples sent to you, one is always afraid that they will simply disappear into a pile in the too hard basket. So to see your face and to hear what you are saying is huge. Thank you.
Oh, that's enormously kind. I have a couple of people that work very hard on this, most specifically my retirement villages specialist, Tristan Fluherty, who has guided my views on this, as has my policy lead, Dr. Michelle Reyes. Like I said, we take a informed position here. So sometimes the Retirement Commission has opinions that are not informed, and she's told not to say them.
Right. Just
Thank you.
wait. Yes, where you go, Roger.
Jane, good afternoon. Roger Goodman from the Retirement Villages Association, region for the Bay of Plenty. Jane, we're aware that the Residential Tenancies Act had retrospectivity in it.
Ah, yes.
Under the grounds and on the grounds that we are actually tenants, why cannot we get retrospectivity also?
I'm not saying you can't. I'm saying it's really hard. And of all the points for it, that's one of the stronger ones.
Thank you, Jane. The precedent counts.
Jane, just a little question. As we all know, the previous Labor government really pushed for this review to really take off in the last couple of years. What's your thoughts about lobbying the Labor Party, because they're in the House, obviously?
I think that you want to take a pan-parliamentary approach. You're hearing the government make noises that they're continuing with the review. That's awesome. I hadn't heard the Prime Minister say that before. So that's interesting, and you'll have that on record now. I do know the resourcing that HUD has available to us to continue the review is pretty tight. So it then becomes an issue of prioritisation. So maintaining a pressure on that process is important. And you would also want, indeed, the opposition, any opposition can be helpful in sometimes pushing this along a bit. They can, of course, be enormously helpful on select committees if we get the legislation into the House. So the question is, when can we get legislation into the House? And when can we get a draft code out for consideration? Those are the next two big steps. And in which case, all parties will have a view on that at some point, and you can make your points to, all of them.
I'm Anne Moody. I live in Papakura Oaks, which is a very small village. And I'm just wondering, when I heard you the first time, I think that was 2020, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm,
I think you said it would take us 7 years to get it changed. Do you still stand by that?
I would have said that legislative change, generally speaking, takes 7 years, unless it's high priority. And what are we now? 2024? Yeah, we're getting close. I'd be saying that would be the time frame, and that will still be with push. It could be done within 5 or 6, but it would need a serious push.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, away you go.
Just, I was at the MetLife Care conference and we had a big presentation from the Residents Village Council that the Retirement Village Association has set up. And there was quite a lot of criticism of the fact that it was set up, even though they say it's independent, by the RVA, and that how could they speak on behalf of residents? And there was quite a lot of comment about that. So how much does the RVA, the Resident Council, work with you?
We've only met them once.
Right.
So we will listen to and talk to anybody. I certainly understand the political with a small p tensions on this. They have residents as members of their group. So do you. It's okay. As I said, soon people like me and people like HUD and people like the government will just tread carefully through those little minefields and come up with answers. I don't think that that council is in some ways too far away from you in some of the areas that you're advocating.
Jane, thank you for that. And you know that we're working on your behalf because one day you'll be joining us as a retiree.
Closer than you think.
There's just one more question, I think, Jane, online from Cherry Cook. Are you there, Cherry? Cherie, is it? Cherie? Can you unmute your mic, Cherie, please? Can you type in the question at all, and you will probably see it?
We've got 185, 186 people online. You're doing very well.
Beats a core of 30.
Cherie, what we might do, if you can type it out to us and send it through to us, and we'll get it to Jane, and she will be able to answer what your question was about. Does that sound okay with you? Is that okay, Jane?
Sure.
Okay. There's a question there from Maggie Story. Are you available for that question, Maggie?
Unmute. Oh.
Yep.
We can hear you, Maggie.
You're in
Nope,
business.
you were there.
Yeah.
Unmute. Maggie, you unmuted yourself for a second. That's what you want.
Curses.
There you are.
Oh,
there you are. Perfect.
I just had a question about whether the salespeople at these retirement villages should have licenses through the real estate agency. It just seems it's a bit too, a bit hard to say really, but I have heard of instances where salespeople, when they sell a person's home, they then forward that phone number to the salespeople at the retirement villages. And of course, the people are feeling very vulnerable. They've just sold their house, and whoop, in comes a salesperson from a retirement village. And I think they should be subject to real estate agency laws.
Yes, I think we covered that in our white paper, or the response to it, because that question has been asked before. I think it's a good point to keep on making. I don't know if that's the right answer, but you're right, they're unlicensed. So the question is, ought there be better regulatory processes around them?
Yes.
It's certainly under the review anyway. Certainly is.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. So no more questions. We'll let Jane go and prepare for. We'll let Jane go and prepare for her meeting with Minister Costello.
I'll tell her that I've just been beaten up terribly by the RVR and I'm feeling very weak today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Jane.
Jane. Well done.
Thank you.
It's a privilege to talk with you all. I hope you have a good AGM and thank you very much for the invitation to speak. I appreciate it. Ngā mihi.
Thank you. Okay. AGM, doesn't matter what organisation across the country. So we're very privileged. So now we will